truly honored to be here with Imelda this afternoon to speak about her show, There Is Still a Tomorrow, Mother, which is also the title of the painting behind her. The title of the work reflects that I chose the title of this painting for the title of the entire exhibition because I felt it encapsulated her optimism and hope, for no matter how dark the times are, we have to remain hopeful and have faith. The earliest work in this exhibition dates from 1982, and the latest is from 2023. When I started to think about the show, I really began to see how your work, Imelda, was the story of your life, and your life was so closely intertwined with the history of the Philippines. I had to do a little Philippine History 101 crash course, which and barely scratched the surface of that history. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing more from you. I know you attended the University of Philippines in the 70s. You received your degree in the visual arts, and this was under the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos. You started your career as a printmaker, and from what I know, your early prints drew on historical material, historical sources. So this exhibition actually starts the following decade, the decade of the 80s, when there's a really radical shift in your work. You became a painter, for one thing, and then the content of your paintings, the themes and subjects you chose, reflected the immediacy of what was happening in the world around you in the Philippines. It captured the political turmoil, and it was very much of the moment. And I've always, I'm very curious to know what prompted you to make such a radical change, to kind of leave what I think of as the safety of the world of printmaking and of history, and moving into the present and working in a very large scale in a different medium. Can you tell us about that?
I started out really as a printmaker in the 70s. In school, the School of Fine Arts at the University of the Philippines, I was taught silkscreen. That was the only printmaking technique that was taught to us, the advertising course. And then after graduation, I wanted to explore more on intaglios and etchings, which I did. And I concentrated more on national identity, because as these paintings would show, the hazy figures there would represent myself as looking for my own identity. But earlier than that, it's really more a national identity that I was searching, because we had a colonialism of 400 years and 50 years of Hollywood colonialism. And I thought I was the only one thinking of that, but I saw that everyone, even in theater, music, and so forth, was in a kind of search of trying to define ourselves as Filipinos. In the 80s, I was already a young mother with the young children. I had a very wide perspective, I knew, being from the university, but as a mother, as a wife, I became very isolated inside the home, because I had to take care of the children, the husband, and just concentrate on domestic obligations. But it never left me to be trying to search out. So my setting would be windows of my very own home. Well, at home I had the bahay kubo or sawali bamboo house extension of my house. I used to bring my canvas, my paint, or even play with my children there. And when I brought out my canvas to the little bamboo hut, I saw that it fitted so well. My very colorful canvases fitted so well with the windows and the walls of the bamboo house. So what I did was I disassembled the windows and provide them with my paintings. And of course, I had to refurbish that. And even the walls I had to put down, and I came up with another painting using bamboo mud. And I use very intimate materials like the crochet curtains and doily. They were crocheted by my mother or my grandmother. So they're very personal and close to me. And also, for example, the palm frond. If you're familiar with the Catholic iconography for Holy Week, there is a palm frond. In the Philippines, the folks, they're ordinary folks, but they're so creative. They would get the palm and make patterns, florals, and put some birds or some decoration with it. And I imitated that using textile.
Oh, maybe we could back up for a second and just, since we're looking at this work right here, a painting from 1985, maybe we could talk, what is the title and what is the theme?
The title of that work, if I remember right,
in English, it's Heart's Plaint.
Heart's Plaint. Daing ng Puso, or Heart's Plaint. It's about the U.S. intervention in our political and economic life, and there is military support for the dictatorship, which was very oppressive. I should swing back and forth. This is 82 and 85. Martial law was declared when I was bearing my firstborn here.
1972.
Yeah, I had her my tummy and I was watching President Marcos is declaring martial law 1081. I was watching that and wow, I was so scared what was going to happen. Are they making a roundup of everything? Well, the military became very conspicuous for a while. Although later on, you wanted to make it a soft dictatorship, so you know you're being watched, but you don't see them. Going back to this, in 1982 then, there was the Bataan nuclear plant in the works. It had billions of budget, but we really need the budget to give livelihood to the lower social class, but then the cronies and the president himself pocketed billions with the contract to build the Bataan nuclear plant. And what I'm expressing here is the anxiety over a nuclear holocaust. It's like an end of the world anxiety, which I show here.
It's interesting that you see these political events through the lens of your role as a mother, and thinking very much about the family, about domestic life, and the effects of all of politics on domesticity. In your retrospective catalog, Refusal and Hope, which was presented in Manila in 2022, you wrote about the 80s, and you said, from 1983, the political movement against the Marcos dictatorship hurled me to heights of rage and protest. And I was so taken by that, I think, because it seems so relevant also to today's life in the United States. But I was wondering if it was a combination of, I mean, that rage and protest, and then you had a new family. I'm just kind of trying to construct your mindset in terms of how you set out on painting these really ambitious works while being a mother, a wife, taking care of the family, and kind of doing it all.
Oh, let me see. I'll go back to history. I was also inspired by the Filipino suffragists during the 1930s in President Quezon's time. Their activism started with milk. They wanted breastfeeding. They called themselves Asociación Feminista, even those times. So they gathered the children from birth to that they should be breastfed, and up to 7 years old, they were provided with milk if they went to the center. Gota de leche, they call it. And it still exists now, being operated by the granddaughter of one of the leading suffragists. Well, that's an inspiration for me. And for me as a mother, well, I was really isolated to doing the domestic work and having to get milk for my daughter. In fact, I even burnt. I combined painting and feeding the children, but I burnt her feeding bottles, which was a great souvenir for us, and I made it into an installation. Well, I'm rambling.
No, not at all. So I'm curious also about the combination of the religious imagery, the militaristic imagery, and your personal history in Heart's Plaint. And I wonder if you could talk about you mentioned the palm fronds, which in this case, I believe is fabric made to look like palm fronds, but it has the bleeding heart in the lower half of the painting over the lace that was crocheted by your mother. And so the imagery is such a combination of the militaristic, the personal, and also the worlds inside the home with the children looking out and the world outdoors. Can you just talk about how you conceive of the images? Do you make sketches, or are they things that come to you in dreams, or are they what is this? You mentioned are there artists that who've inspired you in terms of your painting?
Yeah, you have many questions overlapping, but anyway, about the palm frond. The palm frond is, of course, if you're Catholic from the Philippines, we use it on Palm Sunday that welcomes a whole week, which is all full of suffering. So it's a symbol of coming suffering, and Filipinos are made to think that for your suffering, you accept it, and you will be rewarded in the next life. And you just have to make do with the suffering here. But what I wanted to provoke is for my audience to see that the suffering is you have to solve your suffering here in this life on earth and wherever you are. And well, my other images there are, yes, religious. There's the bleeding heart, seven sorrows, also combined with a sorrowful mother, because they were the images that were placed in my mind by my grandmother, and even in school, being schooled in a Catholic school. And what I'm trying to say is you don't just accept that, but we have to fight for our own right to uplift ourselves and empower ourselves as Filipinos, as women.
So there's a kind of conflict. I'm thinking about Catholicism, and which advocates for kind of the life after.
Yeah.
But you're in some ways rebelling against that and advocating for action now.
Yes, that's right. Although I'm kind of split because I'm still faithful to that faith, but trying to make some changes within the practice of faith. Yes.
So one of the other things I noticed in there is still a Tomorrow Mother. The story is told by the figures in this landscape, and the panels are separated by the sawali. The human body is something that we relate to as viewers as we look at this painting, but we also relate to the size of the panels themselves. Mm-hmm. And they're very much scaled to the human body. And I was taken by the fact that the two girls have a little seam bifurcating. If they're each standing in a separate canvas, but they're united. But I'm wondering about the dimensions of your work and how you chose the size of the canvases. I think you decided to frame these to create that sense of looking outside.
Oh, the size? Well, they had to fit my car. And it was small, I didn't have an SUV bay. That's the reason for the size. But I wanted to make a big one. My house is not so big, but it filled my longest wall like this. I think my longest wall is even shorter than this. So that's the size. And of course, the sawaliks, the actual size in the extension of my house, which was a bamboo house.
One of the things that struck me about this piece and so many of your works is the way you make art out of your circumstances.
Yes.
You make art out of what's around you in terms of the political situation, in terms of materials. You don't go to an art supply store and buy things, but you really, there's a kind of recycling or a kind of scavenging mentality, but something that's deeply personal, but also in that, you know, the personal is the political. And so I wonder if you can talk about that. When we were installing this work, I noticed that the stretcher bars were all, nothing was square. Everything was a little tiny bit off, which I really loved because it gave the work an incredibly human quality. You really got the sense that everything had been touched by the artist and kind of lovingly assembled. And that just gave it a human dimension that you don't often see today in the art world. Is that something you were consciously striving for, or is that something that...
I'm not a mathematical person, and I know I'm very inexact. So I thought I would make the inexact work for me. I work off-center. I buy good materials, good colors, color fast, and they're very good colors up to now. But it was difficult on the pocket. So I had to combine it with available materials. Like, I had to recycle the windows instead of creating textures from Liquitex or from whatever. So I use whatever is available in my own surroundings, like the windows and the crochet and the blankets and textiles that I cut off and recycle or shapes. As even my little son's toy gun, I wrapped it and placed it on my canvas.
This was made in 1985, which was the year before a very momentous historical event.
Yes, those were the times. Since the assassination of Ninoy Aquino, which was 83, many of us were marching, having rallies that led to 1986, 4, 5, 6, that was about 3 years. And I remember I would go to the Rizal Park, and I would bring my daughter, maybe she was, I don't know how old you were that time. She would come with me, and I thought the mothers weren't afraid. We weren't afraid. It brought even our children there marching. And I guess the military were just felt they wouldn't target us at all. It came there as mothers, and we shared food. We passed around food, and we could go to EDSA. That's the main avenue, almost every day, or in Luneta or in Ayala Aki, where we would have the protests. And yes, it worked.
Right. You know, 1986 is the
86.
People Power Revolution with the deposition, which resulted in the deposition of Marcos, who was exiled to Honolulu, I think, and the ascension of Cory Aquino, the widow of Benigno Aquino. I think she was in power for a few years. So there was a brief, it seemed, restoration of democracy and democratic institutions. Very brief. But you mentioned in your comments in 2022 the triumph in 1986, which resulted in the dictator's flight and subsequent reconstruction of democratic institutions, allowed us space and time to focus on our own situation as women. We noted that the images of women we made of ourselves were always in relation to, if not service to others, as sister, daughter, as wife, as teacher, as mother. As we shared each other's life and work, we were spurred to continuously search for distinct womanly symbols. So in 1987, we formed a collective with other women, artists, and cultural workers called Kasibulan. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, Kasibulan is a women's collective which we founded among friends. There were 5 of us. We were all artists. We were asking ourselves, why were women's paintings and women's works not very visible in the Philippines? So we tried to search, were there very few women artists? And we found out that there was just an equal percentage of men and women doing art. But the women kept to themselves. They just stayed home. They didn't look for galleries and so forth. So we encouraged everybody whom we researched on to bring up and exhibit our work out there. 2 of my colleagues have passed away, and my other colleague, Anna Fair, who's really an activist, is not very well. And there are 2 of us now who are still active as artists. My colleague Julie is nearly 80. I'm 76, and we're happy that the group which we founded is still very active with artists who operate it and play together. And they're as old as my children and grandchildren. So the women artist group is very active in the Philippines.
And you made few paintings. There are 2 of them in here.
Yes. I have 2 paintings inspired by the women's group Kasibulan over there. The title of the work is Kasibulan. The literal translation of Kasibulan is Women in the Arts with an Emerging Consciousness. We thought that it was inspired by the pre-colonial woman called the Babaylan, or a priestess, high priestess.
Right, and visible in another painting in this room, in the corner over there, the red painting.
The red painting? Well, I transformed the sorrowful mother instead to a babaylan. The babaylan was when the Spanish colonialists came, they thought that the babaylan was a witch, like a Joan of Arc. So it was bad to be babaylan. But the babaylan still exist today because they are faith healers, and they would concoct medicines from herbs. They're still around, very much around, especially in the rural areas.
So this is a pre-colonial view of women, and was this a matriarchy, more or less, or?
I wouldn't know if you call it matriarchy, but there was an equal perspective on women, because the baybaylan could be either man or woman or transgender. So it is very equal, I thought.
So then you put it together with the colonial Madonna?
Yes. I thought the colonial Madonna, when it was overcast over the babaylan, she tried to bring out what was originally inside us. So instead of mourning or crying over the pain and the suffering that was given to her and the son, she would fight back for her rights. That was my idea behind that painting.
One of the things I also noticed about this painting is it shone like a curtain. When I first saw it, I was very intrigued by the fact that it projected from the wall. It was like a curtain, and I was wondering about your decision to do that.
Yeah, it's like a curtain, but that curtain is something that makes the subject a little bit lighter, because that curtain has a decoration of flower patterns that I take from the paper mache toys. In Paete, Laguna town, where my parents come from, it is a very folk art wherein the men would make wood carvings, and the women would make paper mache dolls. And even the clothing of the religious image are sewn by the women themselves. They sew in silver and golden threads, and also beat in tin or copper sheets on certain, like the heart, the golden heart, and the crown could be beaten by themselves. And these images would come out every Golden Week, paraded, and there are many saints images that are paraded. It's a very artistic town, and the tradition is alive, although it's I think it's upgraded because
How could it be upgraded?
there will be newer arrangements for the altars. Yes.
And another thing that intrigued me about this painting were the little squares that you sewed on top of it. And they all have pictures of what appear to be the body of Christ.
Yes. The little squares there represent handkerchiefs. Devotees would bring handkerchiefs and wipe the image in a symbol of absorbing the blessings from the icon. They would pat their bodies with these handkerchiefs also. It could absorb some, could be medicinal, they would think, relieve the pain, whatever pain they were feeling in their bodies.
Your use of materials is so distinctive, and the way your paintings have a very physical presence. You know, whether it's the sawali panels or whether it's the application of the lace over the surface or the applique squares. And you talk about your interest in Filipino identity. And in some ways, you seem to be uplifting Philippine traditions and history. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah.
In the face of this kind of Coca-Cola, what you call American pop culture.
I'm conscious about uplifting the self-esteem of the Filipino because of the colonial mentality that was ingrained in our minds, that things that are Spanish or things that are American are always superior than what we do. That is the subject of my first work over there, the red tablecloth. I call it the colonial mentality tablecloth. It's just inspired by the ordinary plastic tablecloth that you see in the market or in the sidewalks. They are printed with images of apples, grapes, pears, and fruit that we don't grow in the Philippines. It became such an aspiration to have such kind of food on the table of imported things. I think I even grew up loving M&Ms and loving those Hershey's because my parents were were colonized with some. American colonization is different. They give you toys and candy and radio and transistor because you buy the batteries and you learn to like the Hershey's and you keep on buying them.
It's addictive.
It's addictive, but they killed local manufacturing because we wanted something from America. I wanted to correct that, and with aspirations for apples and grapes, the poor farmers who had their own agriculture weren't supported. We thought that the sinibuelas or the duha and the piña were second rate to this, and those things are the minor things, but it's deeper than that.
So that tablecloth is in the front of the gallery, along with a sculpture. I think your only sculpture in this exhibition. My wife is a DH, domestic helper, and that was made in the 90s as well. I think of the 90s as a decade in which you were exploring all of these different images of women. I was wondering if Cory Aquino's influence, or the fact that she was ruling, had any influence at all.
Well, Cory we were celebrating Corazon Aquino, but she was also quite disappointing after that because she couldn't rule. And it was her relatives that took over, and I still revere her because she put back democracy, but it was for a very short time. But so much happened after that, and we're practically in the same dark times now, even after that. And of course, it's the same over here. It's dark. My work, The Wife, is a DH at the front of the gallery that welcomes you. It was inspired by my friend of mine who was for several years just a housewife and a mother of 5 children. And she was so isolated for several years. And it was different. She had quite a very oppressive husband who wouldn't care at all how she would be. So one time she just said goodbye, didn't say goodbye to the husband. She said goodbye to her children. And she said, I'm leaving because I have to find something for myself. So she left and she landed in Hong Kong looking for a job, but didn't find any job better than what she was doing. So she became a domestic helper again, but serving another family. Of course, we want dignity of labor, but then woman should be able to find a job that would fulfill herself and what does she want to do. That's the story of my work, The Wife is a DH. It's tragic if she was trying to escape or solve a problem there and turns out that she would land on the same problem.
So your examination of women is both women in the Philippines, but also the Philippine diaspora.
Yes.
And the notion of colonization also has to do with women who go abroad. And you also talk about the sense of identity and preserving Philippine identity as a domestic worker. The women who went abroad preserved their identities as Filipino, and also a loyalty to their homeland. So did they support their families back home?
Yes, the Filipino domestic workers did send their money to their children so they will get better education. That's quite a sacrifice for most. I pray that most of them get successful. But sometimes it also spoils the children and the husband, because what do? They buy expensive shoes, expensive designer clothes, and so forth. It's very bad if it's that way, but it should be taught that the children have to work for themselves rather than just depend on the overseas worker.
You also talk about dislocation in your series of prints. Although we don't have your earlier prints from the 70s included here, you do have 3 prints one is from a series you made in Switzerland when you were works on paper when you were traveling and experienced a sense of dislocation as a Philippine in Switzerland, Filipina. And can you just speak about that work and also its broader connotations, political implications in terms of what was going on at home, the Marcos regime?
Yeah, my work over there, which is on paper and plastics, is entitled The Philippine Treasure Hunt. It's a series I made. I entitled it that way because the Marcoses, when they stole the wealth of the country, brought their wealth to be deposited in Swiss accounts. When I had a residency in Switzerland, I showed this, and it did quite move the locals, the Swiss, saying that, wow, our government, our country is housing the wealth of thieves, and it quite bothered them that was the case. That was the source of wealth of their country. That's their viewpoint, and they don't deal with that. it was good that I was able to show an opposite view of the wealth that was entering the country.
With your interest in materials, the way that you used candy wrappers and plastic mesh from fruit wrappings to weave together with images of Swiss watches in a very dense, almost tapestry-like piece.
Yes,
Right.
There were collages. I combined indigenous weaves and plastics, and wanted to also draw the attention to how we're destroying our environment with plastics. Yes, so I have the plastic forest and the plastic sea. The plastic sea is inspired by when I went on a boat trip to Corregidor Island, and when I reached the other shore, I saw right there and then the whole beach filled with plastic waste that was flown in by the waves from Manila. That should really be paid attention to as a problem to solve.
Which really circles back to there is still a tomorrow, Mother, and your fear of nuclear pollution, annihilation, your long-standing concern for the environment and its effect on all of us, especially families. But we also, before we end, I'd like to just look briefly at two of your recent works. One of them is a self-portrait that's across from the reception desk. And again, it is very much about the future.
Yes.
And another is one of your, a piece I think is very consistent with your interest in current politics.
Yes. And also this one, this bigger painting.
It translates as my body.
My body, yeah. At this time, I was working with a non-government agency who was working in communities, teaching poor women how to control their reproductive health. And that's the inspiration. We went all over in Ilocos, in Bohol, in Davao, in Iloilo. And I saw how the community workers, nurses, and midwives were teaching women how to deal with birth control. So that's the inspiration there. So you have the fallopian tube and the egg cell and the female cell and the sperm cell there.
I'm very curious to know how the audiences responded, because it's clearly not an art audience, it's an audience of everyday people, it sounds like.
Yeah, I was so happy that the communities who were not gallery goers, I brought this to hospitals, to gyms, to clinics, or to city halls, or to wherever near the park or school. And I think any ordinary person would be able to relate to my work, even if they're not oriented about art, and I'm so happy about that. They could relate to it. And they conversed about the art, and they told their own stories. Seeing my images and symbols, they told their own stories. And over there, you were asking me, it's a self-portrait with my granddaughter.
It was made during COVID.
Yes, during the time of COVID. I always think about my children and grandchildren's future. That's how mothers, feminists are in the Philippines, just like the suffragists who preceded us. The Filipino feminist is based on self and the other. Not just the self, but also the other. We call kapwa. That's very innate in us. And over there is my latest work in this collection. And I'm trying to warn viewers that there will be a social volcano. If politicians symbolized there by the swines and the pigs, they all have to fall down the cliff. We have to be committed to education, educate the people in the lower social class so that we prevent the seismic or volcanic threat.
I actually put it over there because I thought it was in conversation very much with this. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Imelda. It has been such a pleasure.